An American nanny named Greta Evan is moving to the UK to work for the Hillshires family and to get away from her obsessive and abusive ex. At first glance, she is amazed by the Hillshires manor, which is secluded and surrounded by forest all around. She enters the home and takes her shoes off for respect. She calls out for Mrs. Hillshire from the parlor, but no one comes to greet her, and she decides to take the liberty to give herself a little tour. Upstairs, she comes across a room filled with old-fashioned toys. She picks one up and chuckles to herself when she is suddenly startled by a noise behind her. It's Malcolm, the grocery boy that comes weekly to bring produce for the family. Malcolm is instantly smitten by her, and he heavily flirts with her. He also tells her about the Hillshire family, and when he starts to say something about Brahms, the son child of Mr. and Mrs. Hillshire, at which point they both arrive. Mrs. Hillshire doesn't look kindly upon Greta and instantly notices her sock-clad feet. Embarrassed, Greta runs to the front door. However, Greta finds her shoes missing, and Mrs. Hillshire lets it slide, saying Brahms likes to play. Greta puts her other shoes on, and Mrs. Hillshire takes her to meet with Mr. Hillshire. She's introduced to Brahms, a lifelike porcelain doll, but she thinks it's some prank being played on her. She gets very serious looks from Mr. and Mrs. Hillshire. Malcolm steps in and signals Greta to play along before leaving. Greta does as told, and takes the doll's arm and says with a forced smile that she hopes they can be friends. Mrs. Hillshire gives Greta a quick tour of the house and tells her the rules of the land. The Hillshire family always keep leftovers in a portable fridge container. They also have traps around the house to trap the rats in the walls. Moreover, all the windows in the house are painted shut. In the study, Mrs. Hillshire tells Greta that music is very important to Brahms, while putting on loud operatic music. She also tells Greta that she must wake Brahms up at 7 a.m. every day and change his clothes. After returning to her room, Greta talks to her friend, Sandy, from back home over the phone and explains the extremely creepy situation to her. Sandy empathizes with her, but tells her to stick with it because Greta needs this job. The next day, before leaving for a mini vacation, the couple hands Greta a list of printed rules and schedule of activities to do with Brahms. It includes no guests, not covering Brahms' face, dressing him each morning, never going in the attic, reading him a bedtime story, never leaving him alone, cleaning traps, and kissing him goodnight. Wow, they are crazy. As soon as the couple leaves, Greta does everything she was told not to do. She puts Brahms on her chair and tosses a blanket over him. She makes herself a sandwich and throws the waste food in the trash. After eating, when she heads upstairs to her room and turns around to look at the doll, she notices that its blanket has been pulled off. Slightly unnerved, Greta roughly puts the doll in the bedroom and locks it before going to her room to sleep. Greta later wakes up to hear a muted wailing noise. She checks Brahms' bedroom and notices the doll's wet cheek, which looks like tear tracks. Greta initially freaks out, but soon notices water dripping on it from a ceiling leak and laughs at herself. Greta then hears the doorbell. It is Malcolm, who has brought Greta's first week of pay in an envelope. Greta asks him about the creepy doll, and he takes her to the actual Brahms grave outside the manor. Brahms burned to death in 1991 on his 8th birthday, and after his death, Mr. and Mrs. Hillshire made the doll their son. Greta immediately regrets judging the couple too soon. Malcolm then offers to take her out of the house later that night. After Malcolm leaves, Greta goes back inside and starts picking out clothes. Greta sets aside a coral dress and a necklace in the bathroom before stepping into the shower. However, when she gets out, she finds both of them missing. She also notices a chunk of her hair has been cut off. Panicking, she rushes out of her room to find the attic open and the stairs pulled down. She grabs the fire poker and climbs up the stairs. As soon as she's in the attic, she gets locked inside. She hears Malcolm's car pulling up outside and tries to get his attention, but without success. Malcolm eventually leaves, and Greta starts looking around the attic. As she looks at the picture of the real Brahms, the attic door suddenly opens. She calls Sandy again and tells her about the strange occurrence. Sandy advises her friend to hang in there. Sandy also delivers bad news. She reveals that Greta's ex had dropped by again, and he managed to pull information about Greta's whereabouts from Sandy's 10-year-old son. Sandy is apologetic, but Greta assures her that her ex won't come all the way to the UK after her. You never know what some people are capable of. The next day, Greta finds her missing shoes outside her room's door. Unnerved, she inspects Brahms' room to find the doll in the bed sitting upright, with Miss Hillshire's list laying next to it. Scared, she runs back to her room and locks herself inside. Suddenly, the phone rings, and when she answers it, she hears a small, tiny voice, like a child, calling her name and asking her to play. She starts crying and screaming, demanding to know who this is. She then sees someone outside her room, asking her to come out. When Greta refuses to come out, the person outside puts a tray on the floor before leaving. Greta gathers some courage and ventures out to inspect. Turns out, it is Greta's favorite peanut butter and jelly sandwich. She picks it up and starts laughing and crying hysterically. She then goes over to Brahms' room and sees the doll sitting next to the list. Greta gives in and realizes that she must follow what's written on the list to be on Brahms' good side. Over the next couple of days, she follows what's written on the list to a T and takes care of Brahms. Meanwhile, on their trip, Mrs. Hillshire is writing a note to Brahms, apologizing for leaving him. In the letter, Mrs. Hillshire has written that the girl is his now. Wait, what? After mailing the letter, the couple drowned themselves in the sea. Oh shit, they really are passing their burden on to someone. Malcolm comes over earlier than usual to deliver the food and mail to check up on Greta. He notices Greta playing the piano to Brahms, but doesn't think much of it. At the dinner table, he asks her out again, but Greta declines while glancing over at the doll. Malcolm takes it in stride and takes Brahms' hand and asks to take Greta out. Seeing Malcolm treat this as some sort of a joke, Greta takes him upstairs to prove that Brahms is alive. She places the doll in a sitting position on the ground in his room and draws a rough outline around the doll. She then takes Malcolm back to her room because she thinks Brahms is shy and only moves behind closed doors or out of sight. They wait a few beats before going back into Brahms' room. When they return back again, the doll is gone. Malcolm is shocked. Greta is ecstatic that someone else is also experiencing this and that she's not crazy. Greta and Malcolm walk outside for a walk. They speculate that it must be a spirit in the doll that's making it alive. Greta also tells Malcolm about her abusive relationship with her ex and the miscarriage she had. She admits that she can somewhat relate to the Hillshires because they lost a baby too. Malcolm comforts her and they kiss. When they go back inside to her room, presumably to make love, they hear music from another room, interrupting them. They head downstairs to find the doll in the study. Greta speculates that he is not happy, so she puts him back to bed. Malcolm is unnerved by the ordeal and tells Greta about something that happened 20 years ago that he held back from her because he didn't want to scare her. Malcolm reveals that on the day of Brahms' death, a girl who used to play with him every week went missing while they were playing. After the house burnt down and Brahms died, she was found dead in the woods. The next morning, while making breakfast, Greta hears the billiard balls clacking from the study. When she investigates, she learns it's her ex, Cole. Worried about what Brahms might do, Greta tells him he shouldn't be here. Greta tries to hide him, but Cole realizes that it's a doll and laughs. Malcolm arrives. He's worried about Cole's presence, but Greta sends him away. However, Malcolm doesn't leave. He watches out for a car from his car outside. Before bed, Greta brings blankets and pillows for Cole. Seeing Greta acting so distant, Cole grabs her and tells her he's not letting her go again and orders her to be packed by the morning for their flight to the US. Greta puts Brahms to bed and tearfully whispers to him that she needs his help before falling asleep. Cole wakes to the middle of the night to blood dripping on his head. He wakes up and yells for Greta. She comes downstairs to see a bunch of rat carcasses from the traps on Cole's bag and a bloody message written on the walls that says, "Get out." Cole accuses Greta of doing it, but she vehemently denies it. Greta notices the doll in the corner and asks him what he did. Greta, come on now. Didn't you ask Brahms to do something before going to bed? Angry, Cole grabs the doll. Malcolm overhears the commotion from his car and runs inside. He sees Cole flailing the doll around and tries to take the doll back from Cole, but Cole slams the doll onto the ground, shattering it to pieces. Cole unknowingly unleashes the wrath of the doll, and the house seemingly becomes alive and its walls start shaking and groaning. The trio panic, and Cole puts his ear against the mirror on the wall. Suddenly, the noise stops, and out comes a man with a porcelain mask over his face from inside the walls. It's Brahms, who never died in the fire. Brahms immediately lunges at Cole and stabs him in the neck with a shard. Malcolm drags Greta away, and the two flee. They head to the front door, but Brahms immediately blocks their way. Left with no choice, they run upstairs and lock themselves in Greta's room. She finds a panel in the wall, and they both go through a pathway in the walls. Greta finds stairs that lead into some small room beside the attic. It's Brahms' room, where he lived all these years. There's a life-size fabric doll on the bed, wearing Greta's missing coral dress, necklace, and hair. It turns out, Brahms never died, and he is psychotic. He faked his death, and has been living in the walls for 20 years, probably to eschew jail time for murdering his playmate. Mr. and Mrs. Hillshire enabled everything in order to keep their son. Greta finds the letter written by Mrs. Hillshire and realizes that she was leaving her to take care of him forever. Greta is shaken by the truth. Malcolm finds an alternate path, and the two attempt to escape. But soon Brahms starts following them. They come across a narrow passage that leads to a hatch that leads outside. Malcolm tells Greta to leave, and he stays back to stop Brahms. He overpowers Malcolm and smashes his fist in his head, knocking him out. Brahms then tells Greta to stay in his childlike voice, but when Greta disregards his order and leaves, Brahms screams at her in an adult voice, threatening to kill Malcolm if she leaves. Greta makes it outside, but decides to return to save Malcolm. She enters the house from the front door and grabs a long letter opener. She soon finds Brahms standing before her. Greta tells him that she kept her promise of never leaving him. When Brahms reaches for her, Greta uses her nanny voice to tell him that it's time for bed. It triggers something in him. As he follows her orders obediently, she puts him in bed when he asks for his goodnight kiss. However, she tells him he won't get any kiss as a punishment and proceeds to retreat. Brahms grabs her and forces her to kiss him. Greta reluctantly presses her lips to the porcelain mask. When the audacious Brahms tries to get intimate, Greta stabs Brahms in the stomach with a letter opener. Enraged, Brahms throws her at the wall and starts to strangle her. Greta almost passes out, but she manages to grab the letter opener and push it in more. Brahms collapses, and Greta runs to Malcolm. Malcolm is alive, and the two leave in his car. The movie ends with someone painstakingly putting the doll back together.